Do you want to pull the chair anywhere there? All right. Yeah.
Good evening, councillors. I make that around about 7 o'clock. Start this agenda and shortly. Welcome to the Tuesday, the 3rd of December 2024 edition of the Planning Committee. Those that may be joining us online and those in the audience that are here tonight to hear the applications. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. I'm not aware of any fire drills that are intended for tonight, but if you do hear the fire bell go, please make your way through the first exit and round to the front of the building there to be assembled for roll check. Without further ado, I go on to item 1 of the agenda, Apologies. I've had apologies from Councillor Bryan, and she's been substituted by Councillor Heeson. Good evening, Councillor Heeson. Any other apologies? That's nil. Thank you. Any declarations of interest in the agenda items here tonight? I've got one declaration, and that's myself for item 6, application for major development, land at Bath Road, Silverdale. I'm a member of the Aspire board, and for that item, Councillor Chris, the Vice Chairman, will take over duties and I shall vacate the chair for that item. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. We'll have a chance to digest these. Do we take that as a true and accurate record of proceedings that evening? Can I see a show of hands in respect to that, please? And that's unanimous, thank you. It brings us on to the first substantive item of business tonight. That's application for major development, 9 to 11 Liverpool Road, Newcastle-under-Lyme. To be found on pages 9 to 18 of your agenda packs.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to property on Liverpool Road, numbers 9 to 11, within the town centre. Shown here on the location plan, edged in red. So it's currently the jumbo play area. So directly opposite here is the new multi-storey car park that I'm sure you've all seen. So full planning permission is sought for the construction of 2 commercial units on the ground floor with 55 student flats above. The site isn't located within the conservation area, but the Newcastle Town Centre conservation area does lie just here adjacent to the southwest of the site. I'll show you some photos of the building as it is currently. So this is, these have taken from Liverpool Road. This is the current building on the site. This is the adjacent Indian restaurant. These are taken from Bridge Street, so the other side of the building. There's quite a significant difference in levels between Bridge Street and Liverpool Road. And these are just taken again on Bridge Street, but just giving a bit of the wider context. You can see the building there on the right-hand side and there to the left of that photo. So the scheme comprises 3 elements, in effect, 2 blocks of student accommodation, one here fronting Liverpool Road and one here fronting Bridge Street. And then with a central landscaped court. The Bridge Street entrance would be the principal entrance, with the landlord and management office space located here immediately off the entrance foyer. So the development would comprise 5 stories fronting onto Liverpool Road and 3 stories onto Bridge Street. So you can see here better, this is the ground floor. So you can see the 2 units there, which will be the retail or a cafe use. And then the student accommodation on the ground floor of the Bridge Street elevation. And then above there are stories of residential accommodation. So there's a mix of cluster flats and studios. 13 cluster flats, which have a total of 59 beds and 42 studios. So I'll show you now some elevations. So this is the elevation here fronting Liverpool Road. So you can see that there are 4 stories with a 5th story there that's set significantly back from the frontage. So from the street level, you actually wouldn't really see the 5th story. So officers originally had concerns about the height of the building on the Liverpool Road frontage, which was why it was set back. The design would be clean and contemporary. The materials palette would be kept to a minimum, comprising predominantly brick and standing seam cladding with limited elements of timber cladding. So it's considered that the design would be in keeping with other contemporary style buildings in the vicinity, and that this high quality development would improve the visual amenities of the area, particularly noting the current appearance of the building. So just to go back to the lower ground floor, so this is accessed off Bridge Street, and there's car parking for 10 vehicles. The car park would provide parking for the Salvation Army premises, which is here, and for the staff of the retail stores. But there would be no student or retail customer parking proposed. But given the highly sustainable location of the site and the fact that the building was previously operated as a children's play centre, the proposed development would be unlikely to result in any material increase in vehicular traffic on the local highway network. And the development would have no additional impact on on-street parking on surrounding roads due to comprehensive on-street parking restrictions already in place. So I'll just finish by showing you that's the other elevation, the Bridge Street elevation, which you can see there because of the substantial difference in levels. It's a much lower development. And then these are some views, 3D views. Now the materials, the colour of the materials isn't what is proposed. The bricks will be more that sort of colour. It's just to show you a representation of what the building will look like in relation to the surrounding buildings. So that's from Liverpool Road again, and that's from Bridge Street. So this is the entrance into the Undercroft parking area. This is the existing Salvation Army building that would remain, and the main entrance into the building would be in through here. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rachel. I have no speakers on this item tonight, so over to you, councillors. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have to say this is a disappointing application in a variety of ways. I look at the design of the building. I note the report refers to it being crisp and contemporary. This means, of course, bland and featureless. And that's what we have. I note also that Corp are not particularly happy with the designs here. And if we think about Liverpool Road, it's actually one of the armatures into the town, which has preserved quite a lot of old features. If we walk up Liverpool Road, or indeed down Liverpool Road from the town centre, we will be met with quite a lot of buildings which reflect this town's heritage. And this building is overbearing in its context, and it's an enormous poke in the eye to those things. So I worry quite a lot about the design in that regard. I also, of course, worry enormously about the fact there is no parking allocated to this nowadays. It seems to me a sophistry of the first order to say that this was used as a children's play area. Indeed, it was, and that therefore the volume of cars will be the same. But that's just not true. Parents used to drop off their children at this thing, go away, pick them up again. What we're looking at here is a population of people who are going to be sat in this area. It would be nice as a lecturer, you know, I would love it if students went from their bedsits to the library at Keele or wherever, spent all their time there and went back again on the bus. That would be grand. But let's live in the real world. That's not true. And every morning as I go to work, I go down North Street in Stoke-on-Trent. I go past a similar sort of development at the Quest Flats on North Street. The parking there is absolutely horrendous. Now, it is the case that there are parking restrictions around this area. So in that respect, the problem will not be immediately local to this area. But that is not to say we aren't going to throw a very substantial number of cars onto other areas, and that does not strike me as particularly wise. If I look at the areas where those cars would go, they're already areas where there isn't a lot of parking, across the ring road, for example, and it seems to me that these are going to add to congestion that way. The idea that these flats will be occupied with people with no cars, brutally put, is a fantasy, and we need to address reality in this committee. So at the moment, unless our people can find good reasons why those problems don't exist, I personally will be minded to oppose this application.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Any other councillors who can speak? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with a lot of what the last speaker has said about parking, but highways have agreed. So we've been down this route so many times, refusing, and then it goes to planning inspector, and he's give approval. Because of the highways, statement of the highways, they haven't got a problem. On design, again, it's just a block, isn't it? Similar to the one across the road of Aspire Buildings, top of Newton Lane. Two questions really. What's the height in relation to the car park? So you're coming in off Rycroft Road, you're coming in, and it does say in somewhere in the agenda the tunneling effect, where you've set the top story back, but you've still got 4 stories going up, so the height between the two. Also down on Bridge Street, that you'll enhance Bridge Street. What's happening to the loading bay? There's 2 parts. There's the loading bay, and next door is the entrance to the underground car park. And my concern is what they're going to do with the loading bay. It will completely, if they don't cover it up, it will completely destroy what you're trying to achieve with that design in Bridge Street. So there's 2 things for the moment. If you can give me an answer on that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Well, I can't give you a direct comparison in terms of heights between the 2 buildings. I do know that this building would be lower than the multi-storey car park, but I don't know the respective heights. I haven't got that information in front of me, I'm afraid. But yeah, initially officers were concerned about that, the relationship and that potential kind of canyoning effect along Liverpool Road. And that was why we sought that amendment to the scheme. And that 5th story is set back very significantly, really, so that from the street level, you would only see that it was a 4-story building. But yeah, other than confirming it's lower than the multi-storey car park, I can't say the direct comparison, I'm afraid. The loading bay, just share my screen again. I believe that that's this area here, isn't it? Which is outside of the site boundary. Right, okay, so is it here?
In the building is the loading bay.
Right, okay. So the loading bay is going completely and will be developed with this element here. So that will be on the lower ground floor. That's the reception area, the entrance feature into the building. So just looking on the elevations, That's that. Sorry, no, wrong one. There we go. So that's this aspect here.
Yes, next door, yeah.
Yeah,
Car park and the
yeah.
entrance to the,
So that will be the entrance to the undercroft parking for this scheme, and that will be where the loading bay was.
memory change. Take the way forward.
Yeah,
Is that going to be covered up?
yeah. It's going to be developed. Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't have a great loading bay.
No, no.
That's the main point.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, just to respond to Councillor Fear's concerns about parking, just really to reiterate what it says in the report, that this is a highly sustainable town centre location. We have a policy within the local plan, albeit a relatively dated policy, but it's the current development plan policy T17 that says that within the ring road there should be no car parking proposed. And as Councillor Williams mentioned, importantly we have no objection from the Highway Authority, so it would make it difficult for us to substantiate a reason for refusal on those grounds.
Thank you, Chairman. With my computer. Yeah, when I saw this application had come forward, I was quite, interested and excited really, because I thought, great, we're going to be able to do something about Bridge Street, which is an important, as you know, Chairman, an important pedestrian route to and from the town centre. At the moment, I'd say the existing building, Jumbo's, from the rear is, choose my words carefully, less than inspiring. I thought the idea of having ground floor retail was great. What concerns me, and I think, some member has got to say this, even if you do rule me out of order, Chairman, is this idea of another student flat development. If you talk to people, if you talk to residents, one of the concerns that they've got, and I was only speaking to somebody yesterday, is the amount of student accommodation that we're having in the town centre, and can they possibly be occupied? I don't know that both universities, Keele and Staffordshire University, are on a big student expansion programme at the moment. We seem to have quite a lot of spare student accommodation already. And one of the things that concerns me from the regeneration point of view is it won't help the council's strategy and efforts if we've got a lot of empty student accommodation. And there's an agenda item on, oh, no, I won't mention that. So I've got that concern. And you can say leave it to the market, but as I say, leaving it to the market isn't really going to help with the regeneration programme that the council is committed to. The other thing that I wasn't too sure about, and I'd welcome clarification from an officer about this, is the consequences for the Salvation Army. Is it simply the case that this development is sort of built around their existing operation and they will be able to continue and there won't be any disruption? Will they somehow be integrated into this new design? I must admit I wasn't too clear from the plan and reports that have been circulated how it would affect them. But anyway, that's my initial comment.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. You can come back on that one, yeah.
In relation to your first point about an oversupply of student accommodation, as you suggested, really, I do have to say to you that we have to be market-led. This is the application that we have before us. We don't have a policy within our development plan that says that there shall be a certain limit on the number of student units within the town centre. So that's the application we have before us. We have to consider that against our adopted development plan, and there is nothing that enables us to resist that. And in relation to the Salvation Army, yes, that they will continue as they are. They will be a separate, entirely separate function, obviously, to the student development. But the design is incorporated, so that the changes to the frontage of that is incorporated as part of this design.
Councillor Heason and then Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that have already been made, and particularly with Councillor Fears. I suppose one of my concerns is that there are 10 parking spaces for the retail side of things, or the commercial premises. There's quite a busy road, both Bridge Street and the road outside. So one of the concerns for me would be deliveries, because potentially that's going to be a very busy road with a car park. So, you know, you could have quite congested roads around there. Plus, when you're looking at, should they become inhabited, 55 student flats, I've not known any students without cars, and they've still got to get all the stuff into these apartments. For me, the parking is a big issue. And again, the commercial part of it, like I say, I'm assuming they will be having deliveries, but I'm not quite sure how they're going to manage that if they've only got parking spaces at the back. And again, as some of the colleagues have said already, I can't see me being minded to vote for these recommendations.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that Safe Policy T17 is the reason we're not requiring any parking spaces at all for the residential element of this application. But could our officers tell us what calculation they would have made had it been outside of the ring road? How many parking spaces would we be requiring, or how many parking spaces would be the maximum? Because policy T16 refers to the maximum. So for a student development of 55 dwellings, what maximum would we have applied to give us an idea as a committee of what sort of number of parking spaces we would consider the maximum, and therefore what would be a number substantially below that, which is the phrasing used in our local plan policy T16. Can our officers also tell us, of the 10 parking spaces that will service the staffed element of this student block and also the 2 commercial units below, of those parking spaces, how many of those are disabled bays? Because we've, in this committee previously, we have thought about, so NPPF paragraph 116 states clearly, applications for development should address the needs of people with disabilities and reduced mobility in relation to all modes of transport, and that would include parking. We've talked about what else is in the area, but you know, these units are going to be for use by disabled people as much as they are by people who don't have mobility issues. And given the really, really tight nature of that parking courtyard that will remain in this development, what thought has been given to that? So are there any disabled bays there for the parking spaces we do have? And how many parking spaces don't we have that if this development were to be shifted half a mile in any direction outside of the ring road, we would normally be looking to get? Because I want to get a handle on what our policy has to say about the concerns that Councillor Fear raised initially about the impact this will have on parking nearby, not immediately adjacent, because I understand there are parking restrictions in place in the town centre, but we all know that there will be cars. I think several members have referred to that. And those cars are going to have to go somewhere. And our policy normally says that we should be able to handle these vehicles. So I'm happy to repeat either of the questions, but if I could answer to those two, I'd be very grateful.
Okay, I might need you to repeat the second question, but the first question, which was why I perhaps missed the second one, was I was working out the number of spaces that would be required. So the maximum car parking standards in the local plan state that 1 space is required for every 4 students. So we have here 100 beds, so nice and easy 25 spaces would be, or a maximum of 25 spaces would be required. So yeah, sorry, what was the second part?
Second question was, of the 10 spaces
Oh, yes.
included in development,
Yeah.
how many of those are disabled bays?
I don't believe that any of them are disabled bays.
In that case, I think our officer knows what I will say next, which is that that is completely unacceptable. I will not vote for it.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Definite silence there. Okay, we've had it made quite clear that members aren't happy with the parking. We're supposed to be thinking about a resolution here. Do any councillors feel able to formulate appropriate resolution to this? Please raise your hands now. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we talked about Bridge Street, to the left-hand side as you're going down, they're all businesses, right the way through to the back end of the court and the subway. Now, I do know that they suffer with people parking all day. I mean, it's supposed to be regulated by the county council because it's on street parking. But there is the old Gardener's Arms, which I think I'm not quite sure about, 6 apartments as a guess. Those park in Bridge Street. And the businesses down there have complained they park there all day. And whether they just pay the fines to the county council, I don't know. But they, it's a detriment to those businesses. So more cars going into that area will have an effect again. Will have a what's name on the businesses. As far as people stopping going into the shop or these hairdressers, a couple of pubs, and the general store, so that they will suffer more because of the people from these flats, student flats, will be parking down there. And of course, again, go back to the old inspector. They'll turn around and say, "Well, students don't have cars," which is ridiculous. So again, I won't be voting on it, and just maybe officers can formulate that on the Bridge Street parking, where its effect on the businesses' viability is, in Bridge Street. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, Councillor Holland, and Councillor Fear.
Thanks, I think, then to Councillor Williams for stating ahead of objection to this. I'd be very happy to move refusal of the application. So the grounds that I would like to mention, because it's what I brought up, paragraph 116B of the National Planning Policy Framework makes very clear we are supposed to consider the needs of people with disabilities and reduced mobility. And I think in the context where there are 0 disabled parking spaces out of 10 to serve 2 commercial units and the staffed element of the residential accommodation, I don't think is acceptable. I would refuse on that ground. In relation to the wider parking issues, paragraph 115, again, of the NPPF talks about the refusal of an application that has an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impact on the road network. I'm not thinking so much about vehicle movements as I am about parking. I appreciate that the Highways Authority has not made an objection on the grounds of parking, but my judgment, and I hope the judgment of other members of this committee, is different. I think there will be a cumulative impact that has been seen. We've had other applications that have been approved within the town centre boundary. I think we need to state quite clearly that in the real world, where Councillor Fear would like to live, and I'd like to live there with him, in the real world, there will be consequences of another student monolith going up in our town centre, and I want us to address those. And I think that it would be bad for those people who we will. So it's poor amenity for the occupiers of that accommodation. That if they want to park their car, they shall have to pay a substantial fee to the borough council to use its multi-storey, because that's really the only place they can go. I don't, in practice, anticipate that will happen. What I anticipate is that the impact on local roads and roads just outside of the ring road will be severe. There will be knock-on consequences of this, and that is why I would resist the application as it's framed today. So that wider concern about parking, Councillor Fear may have a smarter way of phrasing it, but that would be my formulation. It is, it's paragraph 115 of the policy framework, and also the policy that we have, as our officer acknowledges, is quite elderly. It is an old and out-of-date policy, and we've had that used against us in the past, that we are reliant on policies that this authority has adopted that are no longer in date, that no longer make sense. And we are very close, as we know, to adopting a new local plan in the very near future. That policy will be entirely up to date when we adopt it. The third thing that I would like us to consider, if we are, and say I'm happy to move refusal on the grounds that I've stated, if members are concerned about the design, I would direct them to the words of our conservation officer, which appear somewhere in the report. It's on a page that I'm not currently looking at. I think the words that the conservation officer used is dwarfed. This development will dwarf the heritage, the conservation area that we have. It's not in, but it's adjacent. And what we're saying, particularly in one of the drawings that we were shown of the elevation from Bridge Street, you could see that it was taller than the building next to it. And you could see that the other element of the design, the 5-storey element, was substantially higher again. And I feel it's quite cynical for our officers at an earlier stage of this application to have said, oh, well, 5 stories looks very imposing. That's a concern to us about overdevelopment. And the response from the applicant isn't to knock a story off. It's just to set the 5th story back so that it's not visible from the immediate foot of the building. And we've seen that done in other places as well. I go on about the Midway one because I think the Midway one is probably the worst of all of these. You can see it from a significant distance away. It's not when you're standing at the front door that it's a problem. It's the impact that it has in the round from much further away. And I think this will be a very imposing building. I would like members to consider seriously refusing it additionally on the ground that it, by virtue of its scale and its design, it is overdevelopment of the footprint that it's on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And before I take Councillor Fear, Officer just wishes to come back on that.
Okay, I think talking about the parking and the highway reason for refusal initially, just to remind members that it's not just a case that we've approved developments like this elsewhere in the town centre, which we have with no parking, but those schemes, some of those schemes have actually gone to appeal, and inspectors have assessed those on the basis of no parking at all, and has considered those to be acceptable. Those appeal decisions have to be material considerations in an assessment of this application. And yeah, given the inspector's conclusions on those appeals, I would be concerned about going down a similar route with similar reasons for refusal. So that related to both the highway safety issue that Councillor Holland mentioned, but also the impact on people with disabilities. That was a reason for refusal that was given in relation to the Morstan House scheme. That went to appeal, and the inspector, although they agreed with the council in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, they didn't agree with the council in relation to that reason for refusal, which were related to the impact on people with disabilities. So just reminding members really that we've been here before and we've been unsuccessful. And importantly, we don't have any objections raised by the Highway Authority. So in substantiating a reason for refusal on the grounds of highway safety, we would find it difficult to make a case. And then just going on to the design, the comments of our conservation officer and the of CORP, which is the Conservation Advisory Working Party, the comments that are set out in the consultee section of the report are both in relation to the previous scheme before amendments were sought and received. The section in the report that talks about the impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area assesses whether there would be any harm to the conservation area, and you'll see that it concludes that officers sorry, bear with me. Officers considered that there would be no harm to the setting of the listed church or to the character of the conservation area. And that, when I say their officers, that's both myself as the officer who wrote the report, but also our conservation officer. So in terms of any impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, again, we would find that difficult to substantiate. But I know you were talking more about the design and the general development of the site, weren't you?
Councillor, do you wish to come back?
Sorry, I don't wish to delay our receipt of what I'm certain is going to be great wisdom from Councillor Fear. In relation to our officer's very wise advice in relation to planning appeals, I would put a great deal of emphasis on the word cumulative. I had coincidentally had opportunity to assess how many dwellings we have inside our ring road in town centre at the moment. It's getting on for 500, which is a tenfold increase over where we were when I first became a member of this authority. You know, there are flats above, and there were some people living inside the ring road. The total number of dwellings within the ring road is now about 500. So we're looking at adding 10% to that. What I am saying is that the cumulative impact on highways, particularly parking in adjacent areas, is where I would lay emphasis if I was being asked to justify myself to planning inspector. And yes, that does take account of previous decisions, because those decisions approved some of those 500 dwellings that we already have. Cumulatively, it is getting very, very difficult to park out there. And I'm certain if the remaining councillor we have for Town Ward were in the room, that would be mentioned. So I think that's where I would lay the emphasis. Otherwise, I'm very happy to take our officers' advice into consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought Councillor Holland was both eloquent and cogent in his approach to these matters. I agree entirely with him that what we've got with a policy for the inner area of the town within the ring road is a policy for a time that has passed. There is much to be said, in my opinion, for encouraging dwelling within the town centre. Having lived abroad where people live in town centres far more than they live in town centres in this country, I think that this is a very positive thing. However, coming with that positive thing is a need for a new approach to parking and thinking about these matters. Also, as the councillor said, we've got a cumulative effect, but we also have an effect of throwing a problem elsewhere. That the fact that the problem is not immediately there, it doesn't mean there isn't a problem. There will be a problem, and as I say, I see these problems every day as I go to work. It is simply not the case that students do not possess motor cars. I'm pretty old now. In my day, I think of all my student friends, only one possessed a motor car. Now, probably the reverse will be the case for most students. So I don't think that works. I also would be happy to endorse what Councillor Holland has said about this building per se. I don't like the design. I think it's a great shame. We should be looking for planning gain within our historic areas. As I say, Liverpool Road is a very fine armature into the town centre, which is promptly wrecked by this building. And as Councillor Williams has pointed out, instead of having a sort of gradual rise in the roofscape in one direction or not, we have this enormous canyon which is dropped at one end of it. And I don't think that that is a good thing for our town or its future. So I would urge Councillor Holland to persist with his objections. I agree with all of them, and I will be happy to second them.
The design and the canyon effect.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We've had it formally proposed. The objection against this development from Councillor Holland. We've had it formally seconded by Councillor Fear. Do I see any counter proposals in favour of this development to ensure that there's a balance? I can't see that, so I'm happy to go with the recommendations that the councillors have supplied the objections criteria. Can I see a show of hands, please, in respect of the two proposals that we've had from proposer and seconder, please? In favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. That item is rejected. Thank you. That brings us on to item 5 on the agenda. Land to northwest of Bar Hill, Madeley. Over to you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this application seeks outline planning permission for a residential development of up to 155 dwellings with access to be considered, but all other matters reserved for subsequent approval at land off Bar Hill in Madeley. So the site is located to the north of Bar Hill and to the west of Moss Lane. The site's bounded by a rail line along the east of the site and an existing hedgerow to the north. So this is an indicative site layout drawing. So access into the site would be from the southwest corner, directly from the highways of Bar Hill, and an existing property would need to be removed to allow for the access to be provided. So the layout doesn't necessarily reflect the final design of the scheme, but it does demonstrate how the number of houses, along with areas of open space and drainage systems, can be provided within the site. If the application were approved, then a condition would be tied to the permission, requiring that the final design of the proposal uses the general principle of this layout. However, appearance, landscaping, layout, and scale would be considered in full at any reserved matters stage. So here's some photos of the site. This one's taken from the access road to the east, which leads to Moor Hall Farm. So the properties to the right are the ones sited along Bar Hill. Here's another one taken from the same spot looking north. This one's taken closer to the houses on Bar Hill, looking east. And then this one's taken from the east of the site, looking towards the west. So in respect to the principal development, the council can currently demonstrate a 5-year housing supply. However, our overall basket of policies are considered to be out of date. And in these cases, we apply the tilted balance outlined within paragraph 11 of the NPPF, which requires the LPA to assess whether the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would outweigh the benefits. So in sustainability terms, although the site falls outside the village envelope of Madeley, there are a mixture of services within the village, and there's also a regular bus service on Monday to Saturdays. The application site is less than 10 minutes walk from the village centre. And so the access to the facilities listed and options for modes of transport weigh in favour of the application. The draft allocation of the site in the new local plan can also be given moderate to limited weight. However, the development would still introduce a suburban form of built development into a parcel of the landscape that is currently comprised of open, arable land that makes a positive contribution to the landscape. Officers accept that the visual harm from the proposed development would be localised. However, even though the harm would be at the lower end of the scale, there would ultimately still be some harm to the character and appearance of the area. The provision of a strong green infrastructure throughout the site would, however, help to mitigate some of that harm. So in respect of highways, the main vehicle access to the site would be from Bar Hill and would comprise of a simple priority T junction. The site would also be connected to the main part of Madeley via a pedestrian level crossing in the northeast corner of the site, which leads onto Moss Lane. So additional highways information has been submitted throughout the determination period for the application, which has been reviewed and found to be acceptable by the Highways Authority. The plan submitted at this stage also propose a road to the rear of properties along Bar Hill, which could be used to alleviate some of the existing parking issues along this highway. So subject to conditions, and in the absence of any objections from the Highways Authority, it's considered that a refusal on highways grounds cannot be sustained. So in respect of flood risk and drainage, the site lies within flood zone 1, which is land with the lowest risk of flooding. However, the site has a long history of drainage and flooding issues that has and still is affecting nearby properties and highways. So a large amount of technical drainage information has been submitted in support of the application, and a proposed drainage system has been put to the lead local flood authority and Network Rail for consideration. So both of these consultees have requested further information throughout the determination period, but have now confirmed that they raised no objections to the proposal, subject to a condition requiring that a full drainage strategy be submitted with any reserved matters application. So on technical grounds, the scheme offers an opportunity to improve the ongoing issues with this site, and subject to a drainage condition applied to any permission, it's considered that this aspect of the proposal can be addressed. So in respect of trees and ecology, there's only a small amount of hedging that would be removed in order to accommodate the development. The ecology reports submitted with the application demonstrate that the proposal will have a very limited impact on wildlife, and there's an opportunity for a number of improvements to the site to enhance the overall biodiversity levels. So moving on to affordable housing and developer contributions, the proposal would include 30% affordable housing provision, which is 5% more than that required at a standard level. And the responses from the NHS and education have raised no objections to the proposal, subject to developer contributions being secured through a Section 1 agreement. So these include a contribution of over £1.2 million towards local schools. So to conclude, the benefits of the proposal in this case are considered to outweigh any associated harm, and all technical matters have now been addressed. So subject to a number of conditions and a Section 106 agreement, the application is brought to the committee with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Before I open it up to councillors, I have a number of speakers on this item, and I'll take the ward councillors first. That's Councillor Jill Whitmore, and followed by Amanda Beresford. Councillor Whitmore, would you like to come forward, please? You have 5 minutes to make your case. You may start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Right, the Highways report seemed to suggest that people will walk to the shops. They won't. The reports are predicated on it being 500, 700 metres to the village, but it's further, it's more than a kilometre. And it's on a dangerous, narrow path with traffic moving at a pace. And it's also an area that is continually flooded. The reports are not safe as the lived experience does not match the theoretical one that highways have done on paper. Patterns and behaviours have changed. People use vehicles more than in town and city centres. As Madeley is a rural service centre, people travel to work by car, to work. They always drop their children off at school, especially in bad weather, and use going to the shops as part of that journey. For the past few years, the flooding has become worse, with water and sewage running into people's homes, causing anxiety and stress. This has still not been rectified, and each time it rains substantially, the road has to be closed, as it is too deep for traffic to pass safely. And with climate change, this will only get worse. Can we ask, if this development does get passed, if we can have a condition to impose that the drainage situation on Bar Hill would be resolved prior to any construction being started? Coming back to the situation where the roads go gets closed to all traffic from Bar Hill, and the new estate would have to travel via War and up through Bar Hill, which is barely passable for 2 cars, meeting either way. So if you encounter a tractor or lorry coming to one of the farms on Bar Hill, you would have to stop and let them pass before continuing your journey. Imagine the tailbacks if this happens. Traffic and congestion will increase beyond measure, as will the danger extra traffic will impose on the already dangerous and busy junctions at Bar Hill, Manor Road and the Monument, which have not been updated to cater for any extra traffic and are identified by the NDP and accepted as critical road junctions, with the Monument being one of the most dangerous in the county. Coming out of Manor Road onto the A525, it is a hidden junction, a blind junction. You have to stop, wind your windows down and listen for oncoming traffic before you exit the junction. Imagine the dilemma this will bring with all the extra traffic from the new estate. The turning onto the new estate is right next to the point where the speed limit reduces from 70 miles per hour, national speed limit, to 30 miles per hour, residential speed limit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitmore. Councillor Beresford, would you like to take a seat, please? Begin when you're ready. You have 5 minutes.
Chair. First of all, I'm going to focus on Section 106 issues. I'd like to declare a prejudicial interest in the actual application due to business interests with the landowner. That's farming.
Declaration's been noted. Proceed.
Thank you. So Section 106 is intended to diminish the impact and strain caused on existing public open space infrastructure and services as a result of the increase caused by the development. Communities shouldn't suffer as a result of developments being built, and the 106 here, I feel, does not achieve that. As the report states, a long-term maintenance plan of the open space, and that's all it states. There is no pot of money sort of there for us to look at. The money that's been offered for the rest of the 106 terms does not solve the long-term issues. Adding 155 houses and up to 500 people possibly within those dwellings will add a good 10% to the population. This will also add strain on the community services from doctors, dentists and to the Madeley Centre and the pharmacy and the shops beyond. It only mentions this long-term maintenance of the open spaces on site. It does not give us any idea of how much money will be spent on the open spaces. It'll also increase strain put on these small play areas within Madeley. The reason for this is the children will probably congregate from the new development into the schools in Madeley, predominantly the high school and Sir John Offley School. This means that following the school day, they're more likely to use the play areas within Madeley to congregate rather than return home to their new estate and the play areas proposed to be built on them. The new playgrounds are to be built on land on the proposed estate next to attenuation ponds, and also on the plan they look like they're on land that couldn't have a house put on them anyway. The land is probably unusable for anything else, so that's where they have at the moment put the 3 play areas. In essence, really, this is quite clever, trying to simulously make it look like the developer is making it more attractive, where the areas that are offering will not be a benefit or compensate for the public open space strain. It seems like it would work in an inner city, but we are trying to work in a rural community. A lot of the play areas are already diminishing and are in states of disrepair, really. They need renewing, and adding more usage to them will only serve to speed up their decline and possibly close. There's also a lack of any form of acknowledgement of how the additional teenager and young adult population will be catered for, as a total lack of facility for them throughout the area. It is noted that reference is made to a multi-use games area, which is either provided or contributed to, but there's absolutely nothing in the report and no reference to figures on this, and it currently doesn't seem to be properly carried through. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beresford. Which brings me on to, we've got two objector speakers. I believe the Chairman of Parish Council, Jamie Stevenson, are you here? Would you like to take up your position, please? Again, you have 5 minutes to make your case.
Thank you very much. The site, as you've acknowledged, is set in rural area surrounded by greenbelt and open countryside. Section 4.3 of the emerging local plan, which you're seeking to have adopted, sets a key strategic objective of respecting and improving the locality and the rural nature of the borough, including by broadening the network of local plans, neighbourhood development plans, which are in existence. But yet before we even start down that road, a plan is sought to be disapplied. The issues with roads and flooding have been eloquently outlined by one of the ward councillors. They are significant. There are also severe concerns over the infrastructure, given there'll be a 10% increase in the population size potentially, with an extra 300 to 450 estimated additional occupants of the dwellings. That'll also increase the number of vehicle passes through the village. Those extra cars, as has been outlined, will cause the already dangerous Monument Junction to become even more dangerous. The reports seem to suggest that people will walk, but the real world experience simply does not match that. People will use their vehicles, especially in a rural area. The report also contains a number of factual errors. The report states that it's 560 metres from the centre of the village. Put simply, it isn't. We have tried to find out how that figure's been calculated and can't. As the crow flies, it's roughly a kilometre. By road, it's roughly 1.3 kilometres, which is how people would travel. It also suggests that the site is sustainable as it's within the boundaries of the existing village itself, essentially, and only stretches it slightly. Whilst that is true, the West Coast Main Line is the physical boundary to the village. There are only a few houses that exist at the moment, stretching up Bar Hill. This essentially starts to splay the village envelope outwards over that West Coast Main Line, and one wonders where that slippery slope would stop. The key issue, however, is the neighbourhood development plan. Madeley has a neighbourhood development plan. Policy HOU1 will be breached if this is allowed. The officer's report says that that should be disapplied, but I would suggest that the logic inferred there is simply not correct. The officer argues that paragraph 11D applies on the basis that the borough's existing local plan is out of date and therefore a presumption in favour of development exists. But that paragraph is supplemented by paragraph 14, which states that where paragraph 11D does apply, the presumption in favour of allowing development which conflicts with the provisions of a neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of granting the application. The Madeley Neighbourhood Plan Policy HOU1 provides support for development within the village envelope. This site is outside the village envelope. The officer's report suggests that one of the two exceptions for following that rule applies in this case, as the neighbourhood plan does not contain policies for housing allocation. That is not correct. Policy HOU1 is a de facto housing allocation policy. This very argument was made by the Borough Council previously in an application at Baldwin's Gate and was put to the test in the Baldwin's Gate planning appeal. Paragraph 40 of that appeal decision deals specifically with this very point. The Borough argued that policy HG1 of the Baldwin's Gate plan did not make policy for the supply of housing and therefore could be ignored. However, the inspectorate decision states, policy HG1 clearly sets out a list of policy requirements which include that housing would be supported within the village envelope or for infill housing within a built frontage. As such, I do not accept the council's position in this regard, and policy HG1 is clearly one of the policies for the supply of housing, as it provides locational guidance which would restrict residential
minute
development
remaining.
to particular locations. The proposal's location outside the village envelope would therefore contradict policy HG1 of the neighbourhood plan. Policy HOU1 of the Madeley plan is almost identically drawn to policy HG1 of the Baldwin's Gate plan. It provides exactly the same function and should be given weight. To grant permission here would, I believe, require you to essentially say that the planning inspectorate was wrong in that case, and it is difficult to see how that case could be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. I have one more speaker before I hear a support of the scheme, and that's Mr. Gary White. Again, you have 5 minutes to make your case. You'll be reminded after 4 minutes you have a minute remaining. You may start when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, you know that Simon and I were ward councillors for Madeley up until July of this year. When this application was submitted, we both put objections in, citing numerous reasons. A number of those have already been outlined by fellow speakers this evening. I want to concentrate on two very core issues, which I'd like you to really challenge the officer's recommendation report, please. The first is what Mr. Stevenson's already said, which is the weight given to the NDP. And here it is given limited weight, given that the presumption is that there is no housing allocation within the NDP that Madeley has provided. We've got to remember, councillors, that NDPs are put together by communities and parishes. They take a long time. They cost a lot of money. And time and again, we see their weighting being eroded. Now, in this particular instance, it is a young NDP. It is less than 3 years old, so that does not apply. However, the fact that it allegedly does not carry housing allocations is the reason given for the de-weighting by officers. On your agenda pack tonight, item 11 is actually an item regarding another application which has already been given a refusal. And that is before you as a report. Now, I actually read from that because I think this is really important. That application was for 150 dwellings in Eccleshall Road, Loggerheads. The officer's report states, and I quote, "The proposed development will have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the open countryside and the rural setting and character of this part of Eccleshall Road. The development is therefore contrary to policies CSP 1 and 4 of the Newcastle-under-Lyme spatial strategy, policies N17 and N21 of the Newcastle Local Plan 2011, and policy LNPP1 of the Loggerheads Neighbourhood Plan. The proposed development would result in the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework 2023. Just look at that on the screen above you, councillors. This is agricultural land. It is prime agricultural land, and it is outside the village envelope, contrary to HOU1 of the NDP. So let's ensure that officers are applying consistency here, please. So will you please challenge this for us? The second element which I want to refer to is the handling of the section 106, and this has been referred to by Councillor Beresford. As stated in the officer's report, community infrastructure levy is an important part of a planning obligation. The officers appear to have accepted that the applicant has satisfied this by the design and provision of play areas within the actual application. Now, this is a major issue for the community within Madeley. Let's just remember that an application of this magnitude is significant for such a rural hub. What the community needs to see is that fair Section 106 community money is actually made available to be spent by elected bodies such as the Borough Council and the Parish Council. And in fact, the Parish Council has got a number of projects which you can well use this money for, to the betterment of the whole of the community of Madeley, not just a couple of play areas on 155 houses that is currently being proposed. You also need to be aware that there are already 3 play areas within Madeley, so this is really counterintuitive and does not provide what the community needs and wants. Now, 2 years ago, I sat in front of this committee regarding another application in Madeley Heath, where there was an argument laid that Section 106 community money should not be put forward. You listened to that and you actually rejected it. The application came forward subsequently with the money inside. So if you believe that this should be granted, and I would actually ask you, first of all, to really look at the HO1 policy within NDP. But if you were minded to have this granted, then please look at deferral until the applicant can come back with an acceptable 106 community money for these 155 dwellings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. White. Would the supporter of the scheme come forward, please, to speak? Good evening. You have 5 minutes to make your case.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ruben Bellamy, Planning Director at the applicants. This site has been proposed as a housing allocation in both the Regulation 18 and Regulation 19 versions of the Emerging Local Plan. As you all know, there's a new NPPF expected on the 19th of December, we hear, that will change the landscape on 5-year housing supply up and until your new plan is adopted. If you grant permission tonight on a site that the council has indicated that it wants to be developed, the council can be more in control of its housing supply, rather than having to approve speculative applications in the new year on sites it may not want. Madeley is a very sustainable village whose facilities include the schools, a secondary school, doctor's surgery, shops, bus service, etc. In contrast to most land surrounding Madeley, this site is not within the green belt. The scheme is well integrated within the village, with direct walking routes proposed to Moss Lane and Bower End Lane, as well as the existing connection along Bar Hill. On traffic impact, there is no objection from the Highway Authority on either capacity grounds or highway safety. The master plan shows a green, landscape-led, high-quality design appropriate for this edge of settlement location, a point shared by the design review panel, who felt that the scheme was heading towards a high-quality outcome. Drainage and flooding is rightly a key concern, as we've heard tonight. Bar Hill Road floods. This is not caused by our site, but runoff from the hill opposite that flows down Red Lane and blocked drains. Our drainage strategy will direct all surface water runoff to the Bar Hill Wildlife Haven Pond, which flows into an existing culvert under the railway. This has been agreed with the owner of the Wildlife Pond, as well as Network Rail's engineering team. It's worth quoting the lead local flood authority, and they say, I quote, "Land drainage ditches have been included along the northern and southern boundaries of the site to intercept runoff flowing into and through the site at these points during periods of heavy rainfall. These land drainage ditches are to connect into the Bar Hill Wildlife Haven and will maintain the flow of surface water to the haven as per the existing scenario. It should be noted that this arrangement would intercept surface water currently flowing through the site during heavy rainfall events and route it to the Wildlife Haven. Currently, much of this surface water is likely to be routed towards the gardens of properties on Bar Hill Road or toward the road bridge by the natural topography to areas where surface water has been shown to pool and cause flooding. As such, these additional land drains may improve the flooding situation at the road bridge on Bar Hill Road. However, it should be noted that whether the land under the application is developed or not, there is likely to be a remaining surface water flooding issue at the point at which Red Lane joins the A525 because of the adjacent topography, which all slopes down to this point. End of quote. So our drainage strategy is a betterment and a planning benefit of the scheme. There are also a number of other significant planning benefits with this proposal, in our opinion. There's an above policy provision of affordable housing at 30%, which should go some way to helping the 1,200 people on the waiting list last year, as well as the 150 households that applied for homeless support last year. There's a provision of a biodiversity net gain at 31% on a site that is merely required to show a 1% net gain. There's 3.56 hectares of open space, well in excess of your policy requirements. And just reacting to comments you just heard tonight about the 106, and we're quite happy to mitigate our impacts and look at impacts, contributions towards other open spaces within the village. We haven't been asked to, but that's not something we would have objected to if we were. There's a contribution of 140 or nearly £140,000 towards primary healthcare facilities. We did offer a free parcel of land on the site to the existing doctor's practice, but they did not want it. There's a contribution of £1.2 million towards education. The provision of off-street rear parking for existing properties in Bar Hill, something suggested at our public exhibition. Also a pedestrian route to school for children living in Bar Hill that doesn't involve wading through floodwater. And perhaps the most important benefit of all of this, the country is in the middle of a housing crisis. A safe and secure home is the critical factor in people's health, well-being, personal advancement and a stable future, and even the ability to start a family. This site could make a small contribution to help that crisis. Therefore, we would urge you to vote in favour of your office's recommendation tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bellamy. You may resume your seat, please. Ladies and gentlemen, a small announcement at this point. I just need to suspend item business for a couple of minutes while I use the bathroom. Thank you. Thank you, Councillors and ladies and gentlemen, I do apologise. Back to the business at hand. Do officers wish to come back on the speeches heard? Charles.
Thank you, Chair. So just a quick one. In respect to the distances that have been discussed, so it is over a kilometre from the vehicle access, but the measurement referred to in the report is from the pedestrian access close to the railway line. So, I mean, you could have some debate in terms of where the town, well, the centre of Madeley is, but in this case, it's measured from the end of Moss Lane. So, in regards to the section 106 contributions, in regards to the point earlier about the service providers, I mean, the service providers themselves have raised no objections to the application subject to these contributions. So from an officer's perspective, I certainly can't say that the infrastructure would be adversely impacted in that respect if those service providers have come back with no objections themselves. Regarding the play areas, so the policy regarding a developer contribution to sites outside of the application site, that would only happen if they were necessary to make the proposal acceptable, directly related to the site and reasonably related in scale to the development. So in this case, those triggers aren't met. What would happen in this case is that the site would provide its own locally equipped play areas. The Section 106 agreement would then have in place a clause that would require that management of those sites is provided looking into the future. But there'd be no policy requirement for a contribution to other sites within the village. Now, regarding the questions about the neighbourhood plan policy, HO01, the references to the Baldwin's Gate appeal, in the Baldwin's Gate appeal, that the council were making an argument to say that the housing policy in the Chapel and Hill Chorlton neighbourhood plan shouldn't be considered as a relevant housing policy at all, as it was created using out-of-date information. So the debate wasn't about whether there were any allocations in the neighbourhood plan for Baldwin's Gate, nor was the inspectorate assessing the policy in the context of meeting the tests set out within paragraph 14 of the NPPF. So a parallel shouldn't be made between the wording in the appeal and this assessment because they're reviewing different issues. So for the Madeley neighbourhood plan to have a housing allocation, it would need to demonstrate specific sites for housing growth with housing numbers included. At the moment, it doesn't include that information, so it fails the tests of paragraph 14 of the NPPF. We also did seek legal advice on this matter, and that advice correlates with our stance that we've set out in the report.
Thank you, Charles. Over to new members. Councillor Holland, followed by Councillor Fear.
I'll start us off then by thanking all of the speakers who've come to address us. I think the contributions were extremely useful, certainly to me in knowing what to apply thought to. I suppose the first thing to address is the emerging local plan and the neighbourhood plan. I don't believe they contradict each other, but they are in tension. So the site that we're looking at now is, and we're now at Reg 19 stage, we are, as an authority, we have voted to say that this is a preferred site for housing. The neighbourhood plan that was adopted quite clearly says, yes, it's been referred to HOU1. It says that it will support development, particularly within the village envelopes. And for members, because I had to look it up for other members' benefit, both the green belt and the Madeley village envelope hit that railway line and do not cross beyond it. So if you're looking for where the village envelope is, it stops at the railway line. If you're looking for where the green belt is, it stops at the railway line everywhere that there is green currently. So neither of those things are applying to the site that we're looking at. So Bar Hill, the housing that's already on that, is itself outside of the village envelope, and that's very well established housing there. This is an outline application, so we are looking at an indicative plan, but we're not being invited to comment on it except to say that it exists. So I will bear in mind, and I hope other members will as well, that we're going to have to see this application again if we support it at outline stage tonight. And there are certain features that I'm sure we would want to see in that if we were minded to approve it tonight, and certain things that would make me very concerned to vote for it a second time at full application time. Because we are being asked to look at access, can I ask our officers to show us a couple of things? The first is, can we have a close-up on the design of that crossing over the railway? I thought I heard our officer say it's a level crossing rather than a bridge or a gate of some kind, but can we see that? Because that pedestrian crossing there is what the applicant is pinning all of the numbers on when we're told that this is, this site has access to the centre of Madeley. It's not from the vehicular access, it's from that point there. That's where the numbers are smallest. And I'd want to make very sure that it was safe and had been looked at by all the relevant people. And the second thing is, for that vehicular access, can we see details of the speed reduction scheme that's going to be put in place? We heard from one of the public speakers representing Madeley, one of the councillors, that it's very close to where the national speed limit road kicks in. We're being told by our officers in the report that there will be mitigation of that and that it will be made safe as part of this application. I'd like to reassure myself that that is the case. And those two things are probably the place where I'd like to start. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. That's a very useful contribution and a good place to start. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think Councillor Holland's outlined some very salient points there. I note, again, I mean, thinking about that pedestrian access, it would be nice to know exactly what that looks like. The report tells us that the police have had no comments on these things. From time to time, of course, pedestrian access does cause antisocial behaviour. On the other hand, sometimes it does not. I was very worried when we had the development in Silverdale that areas there would generate antisocial behaviour. But broadly speaking, in fact, they've been all right in that regard. And I've been very happy about that. So I would hope this was the case here. It's been an interesting debate, and clearly, like most things in life, there are pluses and minuses on both sides. I must say, at the moment, I'm inclined to feel that the pluses outweigh the minuses. We had a long list of contributions that could be made here. I also wonder, actually, whether this size of estate would not, in fact, harden up the viability of bus routes, which have wobbled from time to time in this part of the world. Looking at it, I'm aware this is an outline plan, and at the moment I'm minded to allow this to proceed, but I'd like to put down the odd marker, given that we've got representatives from the developer here. I do think that the planting screening here is very important. I think the stress that was placed on biodiversity is important, and I wouldn't wish to see the greenery on that outline plan removed in later proposals. Another thing that I know many members of this committee have been worried about in the past is things like refuse collection. I know Councillor Hutchinson will agree with me on this one. And when I look at that plan, I am very heartened to see that most of those roads join up. And I would look forward to a plan coming forward where those highways were adopted, and that the decent thing is done here, and people are not made to drag their bins long distances. And again, of course, when we have those long distances, we only ever get the half distance, don't we? Because people forget that you've got to take it precisely the same distance back to your property as take it out in the first place. On the other hand, I thought what was said about the wildlife pool, drainage here, this has always been a problem, seems to me a planning gain. Maybe a problem was raised about play areas and the number of them. I noted with interest that the representative of the developer said they were flexible about 106 monies. And again, if this goes forward, I would look forward to a meeting with the officers of the council to see how that money might potentially be better deployed than it is at the moment. But on on those notes, as I say, at the moment, I'll listen to what other members have to say. I am minded to think that there are more benefits than debits here, but I would want to put down some markers for this procedure if it goes further forward.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Yeah. Officers like to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Just one quick point. So, just on the final design of the crossing on the railway line and the final details of the vehicle access point. So, the Highways Authority have requested that those details be secured by condition for the time being, and that information be submitted with the reserved matters stage. So, we don't have those full details at the moment. We'd have to look at those in a subsequent reserved matters stage.
Thank you, Charles. Councillor Williams. John.
Chairman, just a question first. How many properties can access the estate on one road? Used to be a policy. It's only X amount of properties can built off one.
Okay. I think there's a policy about how many properties can be accessed off a private drive, but there isn't one. Well, even if there is one, which I'm not aware whether there is, but the Highway Authority have considered the application in detail and have sought lots of additional information, and they're satisfied on the basis of the information that they've received. So,
thanks for that. I think if this application is approved, I think we missed the boat on traffic in Bar Hill. And it's been stated by residents and the councillors there. They come down from right-hand bend and you had a load of stationary traffic on the left-hand side. People live there and they're entitled to park outside their properties. And then you go to the Unback Bridge, you've got Manor Road and the Unback Bridge. So wherever you come in, it's a very difficult stretch of road, even though it's quite straight. And I was hoping that with the developer, we'll create some kind of parking, some parking behind houses in Bar Hill. That would, take the traffic off that road. And I think it'd be a lot safer for the residents and also people on roads and cyclists and pedestrians. But we seem to have missed that. There's no mention of that at all. So I think we missed something really that could be a planning gain for that particular area and for the people of the state and local area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Officers like to just come back to you on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. There was a quick mention earlier that part of the indicative plans do propose a road at the back of those properties in Bar Hill, so there is an opportunity there for vehicles to actually park in there, which might help to alleviate some of that pressure on the highways. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, obviously, we don't have a final design, but that could obviously be incorporated into the final scheme.
Hopefully, that'll be.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Chairman. At the start of the written report, there's a statement that existing site is currently designated as an area of landscape enhancement. I've not come across this term before, so what does it mean? And can the officers give us some guidance as to what weight the committee should attach at this stage when we're considering the application?
Councillor Gorton.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So these areas of landscape enhancement and restoration, and there's another one as well that's covered by policy sort of N18/2021 of the Safe Local Plan. So the entire rural area of the borough has one of these three designations on it. So they're not to be dismissed, obviously, but every single site in the rural area of the borough is covered by one of those three. So it's all there with the aims of enhancing the rural environment where possible and protecting important landscapes. It's quite a large coverage, so it's not very site specific as such, but it is just something we need to give consideration to in terms of general landscape character and implications on it.
Thank you, Charles. You okay with that answer, Councillor Colton? Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Holland.
I thank officers for their answers to the questions I asked about the access. The reason I'm asking about access at this point is because it's the only thing that's not reserved, and I would, in all honesty, like to see more information. So firstly, that pedestrian access over the railway. Secondly, the vehicular access, because that is something that the parish representative petition particularly raised as a concern. That point of access onto the A525 Bar Hill Road, we know that that road is dangerous and difficult and narrow, and Councillor Williams has talked about parking along it. I suppose my concern would be, yes, so traffic using the A525 all the way from the Monument Junction, coming down into the village, through the village and out the other side. The impact of an additional 100+ houses accessing that road at that location and using it in all reasonableness. You know, we want people to who live there to come and shop in our town centre. That is going to place additional pressure on the road network. I'd like to know that we have applied sufficient thought to it. There are some things I feel a lot of thought has gone into. So flood mitigation, for example, clearly that has been of interest to the applicant as much as it has been of interest to people who live locally. And that's to be commended. There's an awful lot in there that I'm very pleased to see. We in this committee have quite often had applications come to us and say, oh, well, you can't have affordable housing because that's not viable. You can't have Section 106 money because that's not viable. And the application is commendable in respect of the fact that it does have these features, that there is significant money. I won't say it's generous because it's what we require as part of the process, that money for healthcare and for education particularly. In relation to open public space, I'd like to reflect briefly on something that Councillor Fear mentioned, which was the openness of the applicant or their agent who's with us tonight and spoke on it, to consider, not that they've been asked so far, but to consider how best money could be applied perhaps off-site to meet that public open space, that amenity requirement. And is there a way that we can alter the recommendations that are in front of us to place an obligation on our officers to go away and to enter that consultation with the applicants and with representatives, particularly of the parish, who I think are best placed to know where public amenity space is needed and how that's going to be most usefully dispersed as part of the process of building these houses, if we are minded to approve them tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe officers have managed to locate.
Yeah, we're just finding, because there is within the transport assessment, there is some initial information on the crossings, which the Highway Authority do refer to within their consultation response. So they recommend conditions that either require additional or revised details or required the development to be carried out in accordance with the plans that are shown within the transport assessment. So we could show those to you if you wish, but I was just going to come back on the issue in relation to public open space. The issue is that the development is showing a sufficient amount of public open space within the site. So where there is the sufficient amount of open space within the site, we are unable to require a financial contribution for off-site open space. So unless the development was going to change fundamentally and to not have that open space within the site, we could, and I don't believe that we could change that aspect now because it's too fundamental to the scheme that we've been considering, in terms of there's a condition that recommends that the development be carried out in accordance with the parameters of the design and access statement and the illustrative master plan, etc. And the scheme is being assessed on the basis of having that amount of open space within it. So I don't see how we could change that at this stage and require an off-site contribution instead.
Councillor Hond?
I think what we heard from the applicant's representative tonight is that they would be willing to look at that. And I appreciate that we cannot approve something that's not been placed in front of us. So I would not be looking to create a condition that was unlawful or that required something that we could not legitimately require. But there is public open space and there's public open space. And it's very possible for the proportions of open land within the site to remain the same, but for less money to be spent on them, and therefore for that money to be made available for the village's uses in other ways. And I feel very strongly that if there is that willingness there on the part of the applicant, we shouldn't exclude it by voting for recommendations tonight, which will close that off, particularly when a couple of the public speakers that represent the local community have addressed us tonight and said that that is one of their concerns, is that the impact of this additional housing on the village and on its resources and on its open spaces could be mitigated, but isn't, as the plans are currently stated for us. And of course, we are going to see a reserved matters application on this in any case. So it's very possible that changes will be made to that design statement at a later stage, which we could then approve. And I don't wish to make it more difficult for us, but I do wish to uphold what the villagers are asking for, and also what the applicant has indicated every willingness to enter into dialogue relating to, particularly because this is one of the things that could be beneficial. I want to see all the necessary planning gains made. I know Councillor Williams referred to parking. The indicative plan, though, it looks to me as though a lot of the remediation work that's going to stop flooding from getting any worse is taking place to the rear of those houses on Bar Hill. So yes, I'd love to see more parking spaces. I'd love to see all the floods being sorted. I'd love to see that pedestrian access being perfect and usable, and for the vehicular access to be safe, and to make all journeys along the A525 at that point safer. But if I could just press a little bit further on that S106 and the legal agreements around it. Is that okay, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I think thinking it through, given that we are only considering the details of access at this stage, I think we have the scope to be able to enter into discussions with the applicant and to take that on board in the section 106. So we would have to change the recommendation slightly, because at the moment it's just saying section 106 to secure long-term maintenance of the open space, but it would need to be changed to reflect the potential for there to be an off-site contribution. But yeah, I think we are able to do that. And I think we do now have the highway plans to show you as well.
Yeah, so this is the vehicle access here. So obviously going further to the right, that leads towards the village. So these are the speed measures. So that'll be to the right-hand side coming out of it, and then further along as well.
Is there anything on that diagram that you want further explanation on?
So looking at the diagram, I can see, so there's 30 and 40 mile-an-hour signs that I can see quite clearly, and their relation to the new access, if it's created. So I can see where those signs are going to go. Is there also, is there like a tactile thing that they apply at a village gateway? Or is there marking on the road? I'm just thinking, I understand that this will all be laid out in much greater detail at a later stage. My interest, I suppose, at this stage would be, is that going to be adequate? Are the measures proposed going to slow traffic adequately so that by the time it arrives at that location, which is becoming dangerous? So at the moment, the dangerous point is the Humpback Bridge, isn't it? You can drive into Madeley from the west, and the point at which it becomes dangerous for you to be not looking where you're going and going too fast is definitely that point. And we want to pull that back. We want all that traffic to be slowing down. That's beneficial to everybody, particularly people who live on Bar Hill at the moment. But so what I see there is I can see is that a 40-mile-an-hour zone to the left. So it steps down from national speed limit to 40 at that point, and then as you come to that access turning, it comes down to 30 and it stays at 30 then as you go through the village. So that's what's being proposed, is it?
And highways have said that before any operation, well, they're recommending a condition before any operations are commenced, the proposed vehicular access and visibility displays on Bar Hill, including speed reduction scheme with enhanced gateway features as outlined in that drawing, shall be provided and constructed to base course level and completed to adoptable standard before the development is fully occupied and thereafter maintained. So it's quite a detailed, specific condition that requires it to be carried out to the satisfaction of the Highway Authority.
I think the other, for members' benefit, the other thing I can see that the diagram shows much more clearly is which sort of two dwellings that are currently there that are going to be demolished in order to create that access?
It's just a single one.
It's a single one, okay. So, but you can see where that new access is being created, okay. As I say, and we've discussed this before, Chair, haven't we? Development in the rural area, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to enhance highway safety because the impact of these things is cumulative and clearly it is imperfect now, and it is difficult for me to imagine a way of making it perfect because of the location of that railway line. It's impossible to build new roads or to reconstruct access in a way that completely makes it safe. So I'm reassured by what we've seen, I suppose, is what I will say to that.
I think, Councillor, you've got a very good point there. I think that the time to have these discussions are now, rather than waiting for the development to be built and then wanting things put in place. So I think that's a point well made. Any other councillors wishing to speak on that? Councillor Beeston.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to express my concern. Is it the creation of a new pedestrian level crossing, or is there an existing pedestrian level crossing there?
Is that the one in the northeast corner?
Yeah.
It's an existing one at the moment.
It's already there.
It's already there.
It's already there.
Yeah.
I note that most of the distances to the village centre are calculated from people crossing there. I also note that the Office of Rail and Road don't support the creation of new level crossings where there could be a bridge or a tunnel. Is there any indication that the developer would be willing to fund a bridge or a tunnel at that location?
Really falls beyond the scope of what we're looking at today, I think that, but there's no indication of that in the proposal.
Yes, it does occur to me that there will be a considerable increase in traffic there, foot traffic, and if you're expecting children to cross the West Coast Main Line at a pedestrian level crossing to go to school, it's
essentially a bridge over it, so it's not a typical level crossing where you'd be at any risk of a conflict with the trains. It's an existing bridge that runs over it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? In which case, councillors, are we able to reach consensus in terms of a proposal, either to support or reject this application? Councillor Holland.
Me again. My apologies to our officer and to Councillor Beeston if I've misunderstood. In my head, I understand what a level crossing is. Is this a level crossing or is it a bridge over the railway? Because level means level. It's a bridge.
It's a bridge.
The only time that I'd heard level was out of our officer's mouth earlier tonight. So I mean that is a reassurance as well. We're not potentially asking school children to at some point in the future cross the West Coast Main Line on foot at the level this train might be approaching. There we go. So I'm reassured by that. With the change that our officer was pleased to discuss with me earlier relating to quite how we can make sure that the applicant has a dialogue with our officers and with the parish regarding the spending of 106 money, which, as I say, is a welcome feature of this scheme. I would be prepared to move permission along the lines that are outlined in the report. I know that representatives from the Community tonight have asked us to consider not approving this development. To me, it's very difficult for me to resist development on the site, given that I have already, as a councillor, voted for the draft local plan, which includes it, and which includes it as a single site. We are not, I hope and expect, going to open the floodgates. There will be no slippery slope. This site in isolation is considered within our local plan. We are not considering sites outside of it. And of course, when we have our borough local plan approved and enforced, we will be much more able to resist further inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which has been one of the reasons I've been banging on our authority to agree a local plan for a very long time now. We will be able to enforce the Madeley neighbourhood plan. We will be able to enforce neighbourhood plans in other parts of the borough as soon as we get our own house in order, and we're very close to being able to do that. So with that in mind, that is, I think, the single reason why I would be uncomfortable trying to find a reason to resist development of this site in principle. But for outline development, based on the information that we've seen tonight, I'm prepared to move the recommendations as printed, with that slight change to make sure that we're going to have a bit of dialogue with the developer in relation to the spending of 106 monies relating to open and amenity space, because I feel that's very important. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Holland, and thank you, Councillor Fear. Do we have any counter proposals? That's nil. So we've had it formally proposed by Councillor Holland that we accept this proposal, this application, and we've had it formally seconded by Councillor Fear. Can I see a show of hands in support of the recommendations as heard, printed, and the amended dialogue with the developer? Can I see a show of hands? And that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That application is passed. Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item 6, land at Bath Road, Silverdale, and over to my colleague, Councillor Crisp, please, who will take up duties for this item.
Hello. Right, agenda item 6, the land at Bath Road, Silverdale. So do we have a presentation or anything? Yeah, we got a presentation, so take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So the application seeks full planning permission for 14 new dwellings with associated landscaping and access at land at Bath Road in Silverdale. So for context, the site is located on the corner of Bath Road and Cheddar Drive and is classed as largely being brownfield land. So this is the site layout for the site. The proposal would comprise of 2 rows of dwellings, one of which would follow a similar pattern to the existing buildings on the site. Gardens for the properties would be to the rear, whilst parking would be largely to the front, with the exception of 2 spaces along Cheddar Drive. The red circles on the plan show where existing trees will need to be felled to facilitate the development. The trees range in quality up to category B, but there's no category A trees on the site, nor are any trees protected. So here's some elevational drawings of the dwellings. So they'd all be 2-storey in height, constructed of red brick with dark tar roofs. There'll be some detailing the properties around the windows and doors, and there'll be some different brick types used to create some further visual interest. So there won't be any blank frontages facing onto the nearby highways. So here are some photos of the site. The two on the left and the bottom right one are taken from Bath Road, whilst the top right image is taken from Cheddar Drive. So there's no issues in principle to the proposed development, given that it would utilise a brownfield site within an existing urban area of the borough. In respect of developer contributions, an up-to-date viability report has been provided with the application, which concludes that the scheme would not be viable with any developer contributions. So this viability assessment has been reviewed by an independent valuer at the request of officers, and it was confirmed by the valuer that the findings of the viability assessment are accurate. So whilst it's unfortunate that there'll be no contributions as a result of the development, it's important to note that the scheme would still bring it with it a number of benefits. So in particular, contribution to the council's housing supply and the reuse of previously developed land. Biodiversity net gain would be provided off-site in this case and would be incorporated into a separate scheme, which is also in Silverdale, which is at St Luke's Close, and that would be secured through a Section 106 agreement. Concerns have been raised by residents and the parish council due to the lack of provision of a retail unit within the scheme. However, there are no policy requirements to include this as part of the proposal. A national planning policy actually aims to provide retail development within existing town centres, which this site falls outside of. So the loss of the 2 Category B trees from the front of the site is not ideal, but this can be mitigated through new planting, which would be secured through a condition. So there's no outstanding technical issues related to the development, and the application is therefore brought to the committee with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
All right, we have a speaker in favour. Yeah, you have 5 minutes. I'll give you a shout when. Hey, was it? Oh, sorry. We have an objector first of all. Again, you have.
Yes, I was going to say we object.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you have 5 minutes. I'll give you a bell when you got a minute left.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Henrik Adamchuk. I am Chair of Silverdale Parish Council. This has come to our meeting on several occasions, and we wish to object. The substantial objection relates to the loss of a retail unit on an estate, which is the largest estate in Silverdale. It's got 450 households, and that means 1,000 people have lost their store, their retail unit on the estate. So we're quite clear about that. The officer's report on page 42, it does summarise that the parish council has concerns, and it explains why it's not available here. There's a couple of omissions to that report. The reason why there is no existing retail on this site at the moment is because it has been demolished. The housing association has demolished that part of the site, so the retail unit that was there could no longer exist and is no longer with us. So that's an omission that should be in the report. In addition, there's alternatives that are mentioned in the report. Remembering that it's 1,000 people we're talking about who have lost this retail unit, and it uses a government guidance to base its argument, guidance called Providing Journeys on Foot. So it's saying that it's quite easy from the estate to access other retail units on the high street nearby, which takes 16 minutes, and elsewhere in the parade, which is at the centre of Silverdale, which is over 30 minutes. However, that applying that guidance doesn't take into account the fact that the estate is a very hilly estate. I have worked out
from a contour map, which is shown here. You can see the red bits, which are the hilly bits, and the green bits, which are the lowland bits, that from top to bottom, you have to climb 39 metres. And there's no mention of that point in the guidance or in the algorithm that's used to work out these particular. So it's pretty inconvenient for people who live in on that particular estate. And certainly I'd be very annoyed if my local retail provision was demolished and taken away without some thought put to some kind of alternative provision. And although it does suggest post this planning application, it might be considered, but the reality is you've flicked it away like a fly, because once the council agrees this scheme, there's not going to be another scheme to come forward, is there? There's not going to be another application for a retail unit. You're knocking it off the scale. So basically, you're killing it dead. And I'm very disappointed at that. And I think a lot of people who live not only on the old miners' estate itself, but on the periphery of that estate, there's some new development on either side. They'll be perturbed because you've taken that away. So we're very disappointed. And that's the main substantive weakness in this particular scheme. Generally, we're very happy to receive reports of planning applications to social housing. You have 1 minute left. However, we want retail as well. The second key issue is this perverse decision that all the biodiversity net gain will be on another site. It seems that that's a strange way that the calculation is made. Finally, the provision of the loo accessed from a kitchen is a very bizarre weakness in this particular scheme. I've never lived in a property where you get into a toilet from a kitchen without an intervening lobby that's that allows fresh air for hygiene, etc. So there's a couple of quite important drawbacks to this scheme, and I would recommend that the council here rejects it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Order, Mr. Chair. Our public speakers entitled to introduce visual aids. I apologise, but our policy always used to be that while they can use their time to speak, the use of visual aids is discouraged. And so out of fairness to all speakers, can I reinforce that?
Thank you, Councillor Holland. We have another speaker now, I believe, in support as well this time. Right. Okay, yeah, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Aspire Housing Association this evening. I'd also like to express our gratitude to your officers for the way in which they have engaged with us during this planning application process and for preparing the thorough report that you see before you. As you will probably be aware, all the buildings that previously occupied this site, bar one, had been vacant for several years. The condition of them had deteriorated to the point where they were in a very poor state of disrepair. Aspire therefore took the decision to demolish them earlier this year, following approval of a separate prior notification application. So the site currently lies vacant and presents a logical and sustainable opportunity to bring forward much needed housing in the borough and on a previously developed site. Aspire's proposal will deliver 14 affordable homes for rent, comprising 12 two-storey, two-bedroom houses and 2 two-bed apartments, We believe the provision of these affordable homes will help make a much needed contribution to addressing the borough's current shortfall in the supply of affordable housing. The proposal has been shaped through extensive engagement with your officers, elected members through the council's SPCG, and from feedback Aspire received from Design Midlands following an independent design review. We are confident, therefore, that the scheme before you will deliver a high-quality residential development which satisfies all policy provisions in respect of design and layout. As you will see from your officer's report, they and all consultees are satisfied that the proposed development would not give rise to any adverse technical or environmental impacts. The Local Highways Authority have concluded that the scheme incorporates satisfactory arrangements for bin storage and collection. In addition, the proposal will deliver a policy-compliant amount of on-site vehicle parking and EV charging points. We will be required to relocate the existing northbound bus stop on Bath Road, approximately 45 metres to the north. The Local Highway Authority and bus service provider have confirmed that they are happy with this approach. This will be secured through the imposition of a condition which Aspire welcomes. Whilst we acknowledge that the proposed development of this site will lead to the removal of several trees, the submitted landscape strategy sets out how the proposal has been designed to create a new landscape boundary, which includes replacement tree planting. In our view, this is sufficient to mitigate tree losses and will also help to enhance the appearance of the wider landscape. Insofar as BNG is concerned, due to the site's baseline habitat value and its relatively small size, it has not been possible to achieve the mandatory 10% uplift on the site. Instead, our approach has been to provide the BNG enhancements across Aspire's land holdings within the area. Your officers are satisfied with this approach, and these will be secured through a Section 106 legal agreement. This application therefore presents the committee with an opportunity to approve sustainable, affordable housing development, and in doing so, help to minimise the need for the local authority to grant planning permission for housing developments in other, less sustainable locations elsewhere in the borough. In the circumstances, we believe that the case for granting planning permission is compelling, and urge you therefore to resolve to grant planning permission in line with the recommendation of your officers. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Sorry, Charles, want to say something?
Yeah, just come back on a couple of the points. So the first one, with regards to the sort of toilet and kitchen arrangements within the properties, that's essentially a building regulations issue. So that falls beyond the scope of being a planning matter. Just a quick one on the biodiversity net gain as well, in respect of that being an off-site contribution. So the preferred approach is for it to be provided within the site, but it's not against policy to be provided off-site. National policy essentially says if it can't be done on-site, then do it elsewhere, so long as it's secured appropriately.
Okay, Councillor, shall we open up for debate? Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very much minded to vote to approve this application, as any increase in social housing in my ward is to be very much welcomed. Now, as the ward councillor for Silverdale and on behalf of Parkside residents, I'd like to ask about the point on page 42 of the report, which states quite clearly that there is no interest in the option of providing a single retail unit. And I'd like to know what efforts have been made to establish this fact, either through consultation or advertising, and also what form would a commercial entry coming forward need to take? For example, could it be a written proposal, a business plan, etc.? And would not this interest be dependent on the affordability and conditions of any lease? So that's something I'd like to clarify with the officers, please.
Yeah, Just on that, so that there is no policy requirement to essentially say that the scheme should bring forward a retail unit. So we wouldn't ask, nor would they have to demonstrate that the applicant has to show how a commercial unit could be viable or not. It's just not a policy requirement, sort of full stop, really. So that requirement would be unreasonable from our perspective.
That's the mayor.
Thank you for allowing me back in, Chair. I was involved in the inception of this project, and it was proposed that the 14th property would be planned to be of flexible use so that it could be a maisonette upstairs with a retail unit underneath. Has that now been withdrawn completely from plans?
I might just have to look at this for a second and come back to you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the following paragraph in the report outlines that the design remains flexible, so were there to be some interest, this could happen. So I think that is embedded in the report.
Is that the case, Charles?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. That is why I asked how would interest in such a venture manifest itself. That's why I asked about a written proposal, business plan, etc.
Go ahead, Richard.
That's a separate matter that's outside the planning system. How that works isn't something that we would require information on. As Charles said initially, there is no policy within our development plan that requires a shop in this location. In fact, to the contrary, the NPPF sets out that retail units should be, there's a sequential approach to those. So if we had an application in now for a retail unit in a location such as this, we would be saying to the applicant, we need you to demonstrate why there aren't any appropriate available units in the town centre that you could, for you to locate there rather than here, because this is outside of town centre and national policy requires town centre uses, i.e. a shop, to be in the town centre sequentially as the preference. So there is nothing that allows us to require a shop. In fact, to the contrary, national policy says that we shouldn't be requiring a shop in this sort of location.
Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Brown?
Chair, please beg my indulgence. There was a shop there until August 2023. So is it policy then for shops to be removed?
No, there's no policy that requires shops to be removed, but neither is there a policy that says that shops can't be removed, and that if one is removed, it should be replaced. So we have no ability to require a shop in that location.
Thank you to officers for making that clear for my residents.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, in terms of the application that has come forward, I'm minded to support it. I think that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. One thing I did want to ask about, inevitably parking provision. I think the report does refer to a shortfall in terms of parking space, which suggested may well be addressed by residents using the car park off Cheddar Drive. Is that correct? I mean, is that, I suppose what I'm asking really, is that practical? Is that something that will really could happen? Or would there likely to be some objections to that?
I mean, I suppose it's very difficult to say. I mean, there's no reason to suggest it couldn't happen, but I think in either instance, because the Highways Authority haven't objected to it, we would still follow their advice on that, really. I think the shortfall in provision is quite small. 7 spaces below maximum standards. But in this case, again, without an objection from the Highways Authority, it'd be quite difficult for us to say that that's going to be so significant as to result in a, well, I suppose, a sustain a refusal on highways grounds, really.
No, Chair, it just seems such a, in theory, you know, like such a good solution. I did wonder if there were any snags, that's all.
Councillor Holland?
Thank you, Chair. I'll declare my nostalgic interest as a former resident of Bath Road for 7 years in my youth. I'd like to lament and eulogise the Parkside Action Centre, if I may. I think when I was first elected to this authority, one of my colleagues was Councillor George Cairns. It was his area of special interest. And I think by virtue of that, that area was well used. So the car park did get used, the action centre did get used. Yes, there was a news agent operating out of one of the retail units there. And yes, I was able to buy my milk from there. I can attest to everything that the chair of the parish council has said about the distance to get from that location or from that estate down to the parade in the centre of Silverdale on foot. It is hilly, so it is quite difficult to trek all the way over there, as indeed I had to on many an occasion to top up my electricity meter. So it is sad that we are losing retail at the location, but I think Councillor Brown has been very clear in extracting from our officers an explanation as to why that's the case. The applicant's representative tonight is quite correct in saying that, and I think before it finally closed, it was a sandwich shop, wasn't it? Something like that. Was it a sandwich shop, the last one? No?
It was a general store, and it was very much valued by the residents because the shop owner would deliver bread and milk, etc. So it was very
completely
much
agree.
valued.
A phenomenal thing to have, but not something which we're as a planning authority entitled to require at the location. It does leave, if all retail, if all non-residential use of the site is removed, it leaves that car park immediately to the north of the site slightly orphaned, and I'm inclined to respond to the question Councillor Gorton posed by saying yes, I have every expectation that residents will park there. I can see that is where the bus stop is being located as well, isn't it? So from its current location, which is the dotted box along Bath Road, you can see that bus stop will move there. There is no reason why residents can't park their cars there already, I don't think. And while I share colleagues' frustrations that we're not able to ensure that there will be any kind of retail use of any of these units in the future, it is a strong application. In relation to biodiversity net gain, the key word is net. It's done across the board. If Aspire are listening, and I know that they are, it would be fantastic if they could demonstrate that net gain is being delivered through Aspire property as close to this as possible. I appreciate that Aspire owns an awful lot of property, but if they could assist in improving biodiversity within the parish of Silverdale, let's say, that would be more just than saying, oh, we're meeting this need in some remote location and you will never enjoy the benefits of it. So it being the case that I can't see a reason to refuse the application on sound planning grounds, I would also be minded to support it.
Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And in that vein, to get the ball rolling, I'd like to move that we accept this application as printed in front of us. I hear what people have said. I note in the report that the potential for a retail unit here exists. This is not council property, therefore we cannot do that. It is in the power of the owner of this property to take that up if they think it's worth their while, if somebody makes a proposal in that way. But were we to refuse it on these grounds, we would simply lose this at appeal. We have got no good grounds for doing that whatsoever. Also, I'm always a little bit chary of these things, thinking of my own experience as a councillor. Failed retail units can attract quite a lot of antisocial behaviour. So here we've got the option, the door is open, but we are not building in potential trouble. in that regard. As regards I haven't looked at the interiors of these things, but as our officer points out, my understanding is that's a building regs matter and therefore well out of the remit of this committee. I can't remember a time when we've sort of scrutinised the internal workings of bits and pieces. So I think this does tidy up this area quite substantially. That, like Councillor Gorton, there are a lot of planning gains to be had here, and therefore I would like to propose that we accept this application.
Councillor Williams.
As a past resident of Parkside, actually, I lived up there most of my life until we moved into Crossy. I think this will be an asset, actually. We used to have 4 shops there, and then along came supermarkets, and everybody started getting on the bus and the cars and shopping out of Silverdale, didn't they? But I really do think it'll be an asset. Them shops were there for many years empty, and actually demolishing is actually gained as a gain for the estate. We did have loads and loads of trouble up there for many, many years. So I do think this will be an asset.
Okay, so if there's no one else, Charles would just like to clarify something at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. I have noticed there's somebody missing actually in the recommendation. The point where it's talked about the section 106 in point A would also need to include the provision of the affordable housing within that. So, if you do see to approve it, we would recommend obviously that also includes the affordable housing provision, as well as the securing of the off-site B&G.
Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Fear. Do we have a seconder? Yep, okay, Councillor Williams. Okay, so all those in favour? Okay, that's everyone. So the motion is passed. I think we can recall Chairman Northcott.
Okay, thank you, councillors. On with tonight's agenda, item 7, application for major development of land between Apedale Road and Palatine Drive, Chesterton.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that planning permission has been granted for the erection of 330 dwellings on land off Apedale Road in Chesterton. Full planning permission is sought for the variation of condition 2 of that permission, which lists the approved plans and documents. The number of dwellings is not altered from the original permission, and there is no material change in terms of the impact on flood risk, environmental health matters or ecology. The application includes a series of minor positional changes to a number of the plots. So it's a bit difficult to see on this plan, but all of the plots that are edged in blue are where there are minor changes to the positioning. So it's moving them by between 0.5 metre and 1 metre to improve interface distances and off-street parking provision. So these amendments are considered minor tweaks given the nature of the development and the context of the original approval. Additionally, a detached garage is to be relocated and some swapping of house types to improve plot layouts is proposed. Finally, excuse me, an additional temporary access point is proposed to the east of the main access off Apedale Road, facilitating vehicular access to the sales and marketing area. So you can see here on the overall layout, this is the main access into the site, and there's a temporary access proposed in at this point here, which I'll show you in more detail on this plan. So, as I say, it's to facilitate an additional temporary access point for the sales and marketing area. The access point will be closed off once the properties have all been sold on the site. There are no concerns relating to any of the design changes given the limited scale of the changes proposed. And there would be negligible impact on the street scene and the wider area. In terms of this additional access, 3 trees would be lost, which you can see coloured here in red, to facilitate the creation of the temporary access. But given the significant number of trees that would remain on the frontage, it is considered that this limited loss would be acceptable. The access would be temporary, and the applicant has confirmed that replacement trees would be planted once the access has been closed off. And you'll note in the supplementary report that's been circulated, a condition has been recommended requiring that replacement planting. So just to show you some photos here of the site. So this is looking down Apedale Road towards Apedale Park. And this is looking back up the other way towards Chesterton. So this is the site here on the right-hand side, and these are the trees that are along the frontage of the site. This is just moving up a bit closer to the main access into the site. And these are the trees here, which, so the temporary access would come in at about this point here. So 3 of these trees would be removed. And that's a final photograph, just looking at it face on. So the Highway Authority has no objections, and therefore it's concluded that this element of the proposal complies with the provisions of the NPPF in terms of impact upon highway safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm notified of any speakers on this item. Therefore, over to you, members. Councillor Fear, followed by Councillor John Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move permit on this item following the supplementary report. I mean, it seems a little bit perverse to me that this the developer wants this entrance, but I don't think the trees, as we've seen from the photograph, are particularly valuable in themselves, and the developer says that they will be restored, that line will be restored when the entrance is closed. In that respect, I think we should just go with his judgment that he needs this entrance for whatever reason. My only mild concern, I don't know if our officer can tell us, is whether there's a timing on this in any shape or form. But nonetheless, I think when we got that supplementary report, we can certainly enforce the restitution of the trees when the entrance is closed, and therefore I'm happy with this, and I think we should permit it.
Councillor Fear, do you want to come back on that, sir?
Just very quickly to say, no, unfortunately, we've not been given that information, so I don't know how long it will take.
Content with that, Councillor Fear. Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Speaking on behalf of Councillor David Grocott, who asked me to just mention the loss of trees, which you reported, the officers reported. And so the residents are really concerned about that, the loss of trees, but you'll hopefully give us replace them when the estate is finished. So he just wants to make that point on behalf of the residents. Thank you.
Any other councillors mind to speak on this item? Councillor Beeston.
I've had correspondence from a few residents about this temporary entrance and why it's necessary. and they were concerned about the loss of trees. But I think there was a misconception that the temporary entrance would actually be higher up. Some trees have already been removed, which are between houses and opposite another resident's house, which is we're looking into at the moment. But I'm not sure if there's any objection to the trees being removed lower down, other than it being undesirable to move trees anyway. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beeson. Just to reassure Councillor Beeson that the applicant said the reinstatement of trees for the ones that have been removed were to take place. Am I correct? Apparently that's correct, Councillor. Any other councillor wishing to talk on this item? So we've had it formally proposed by Councillor Fear that we approve this application. Do I see a seconder? Councillor Crisp. Thank you. Do we have a counter proposal to the ones mentioned? I don't see one. So formally proposed by Councillor Fear and seconded by Councillor Crisp. All those in favour of the printed in the report and supplementary, please raise their hands. And that's unanimously accepted. Thank you, councillors. That item is passed. Item 8 on the agenda is former Jubilee Bath, Nelson Place, Newcastle.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission was granted in 2017 for 273 student rooms on the former Jubilee Bath site. I've not got a plan to display because I'm sure that all members are fully aware of where the site is across the roundabout and how long it has been in an unfinished state. Condition 3 of that planning permission restricts occupation to students only. And the application before you tonight is for a temporary variation to condition 3 to allow use of only 68 rooms within the development as serviced accommodation. And that variation to that condition is sought until the 30th of September 2025. And the remaining rooms within the site will remain vacant throughout that time. So the reason for the request is that due to the delayed construction of the development, the applicant has been unable to accept students in the September 24 intake. So it's proposed that the 68 rooms would be used as serviced accommodation, which is a particular type of accommodation. It's fully furnished and it's used typically for short or long-term stays, and in particular it brings with it a range of amenities such as security, housekeeping, use of a gym, etc. And importantly, it offers flexibility over the length of stay for occupants. So it tends to be occupied by business professionals or people relocating to a new area for work, for example. So this development has, as approved, has 19 parking spaces and 96 cycle spaces within the basement of the building. For the original scheme for 273 student flats, if we apply the maximum parking standards within the local plan, a maximum of 69 spaces are required. So I'm talking now about the approved development for student flats. So 69 spaces are required. That's on the basis of 1 space per 4 students. And permission was granted with a shortfall of 50 parking spaces. That was on the basis of it being within a town centre sustainable location, and there was a condition and a section 106 attached that required monitoring of the parking situation. Now, for the current proposal, initially, the applicant came in requesting that all 273 rooms were to be for serviced apartments. But on the basis that the local plan standards for that type of use, as opposed to a student use, requires 1 space per flat, that was a requirement of 273 parking spaces. And given that there's only 19 spaces in the site, that was quite a significant shortfall. And on that basis, the Highway Authority were recommending refusal of the application. So discussions took place with the applicant, and on that basis, the number of rooms to be changed to serviced accommodation was reduced from the 273 down to just the 68. And as I said, importantly, the remaining number of rooms, so just over 200, will remain vacant for the next 12 months. So the reason that the 68 serviced apartments has been chosen as the number is that if we apply those maximum parking standards of the local plan, again, as referenced previously, that requires a maximum parking provision of 68. There are 19 parking spaces within the site. That gives a shortfall of 49 spaces, and that is the same as the existing shortfall that there is for the approved scheme. So on that basis, the Highway Authority accepts that the proposed temporary variation would not result in any additional parking demand, and therefore, on the basis that it would be for a temporary consent until September 2025, and on the basis that it would be solely for those 68 rooms, officers consider that the proposed variation is acceptable. Thank you.
Sure. Over to councillors. Councillor Heason.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you're going to guess what I'm going to say. I refused it originally in 2017 because of the parking issue. I still don't agree with this. I mean, 49 spaces short, regardless of how they come to that calculation, it's a totally different scenario now, because if I was having a service flat and I was a professional, I'd wanting to bring my car with me. And I really can't see that we should accept this. There's permit parking in the area that's not good enough as it is. There's too many houses for the permit parking. There's a council car park. I think it's going to cause huge problems. And I suppose what I could say is if you were going to a hotel, it'd be different rules, wouldn't there? Because for a hotel, I'm sure they have to give an adequate amount of parking. So what is the difference between a serviced apartment and a hotel? And I personally won't be supporting this because I think we do need more parking to go with these applications.
Thank you, Councillor Heason. Officer's just going to come back on that point you raised, and then Councillor Williams.
In terms of the maximum parking standards within the local plan, there is no difference in the provision for a hotel and serviced accommodation. And that's why the parking requirements are much higher for this serviced accommodation than they would be, for example, for student accommodation. So there is a shortfall of 49 spaces, but there is a current shortfall of 49 or 50 spaces on the approved scheme. And so it would be unreasonable for us to conclude that there is any material impact or any greater harm than there is in the current scheme. And just to reiterate that it is just on a temporary basis until September.
If you don't mind, I will come back. It is a change of use, though. It is not, what they got the spaces for originally is a completely different scenario. And I can only reiterate what I think. I don't think it is good for the area. I think it'll have a negative impact, particularly with parking, and I won't be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Heason. Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, thank you. I think Councillor has put it quite adequately, and I agree with 100% what she's just said. And we refused it originally, but we lost on appeal down to the old. It's about parking in highways. I see what the officer's saying. What at Cabinet yesterday, parking policy for put it in that terms, for the town centre in that report, it talked about the workers that are on that building now taking spaces up and preventing Jubilee 2 use parking. So that was a detriment to Jubilee 2 because of the people who work on there. They were, I suppose, behind that, once they disappeared, the parking spaces then would come free for the people to use using Jubilee 2. Well, that's not going to be the case if we agree to this, because we're going to introduce more parking. And if only half of these people have got cars that are going to take up these apartments, that's still going to flood the area with with cars. And it's only, as we all know, we all know the area. So really, the policy came from the cabinet yesterday. It contradicts what we're saying today, really. And I agree. I don't agree with this, and I don't agree with some. We can't be static and say we've got to move on. And apartments that can be used by, I can't say the general public, but really this developer got the development allowed, but through the planning inspector on student accommodation alone. So, and that's how it should stay. I'm not making any about pricking bones on the points, but really, that is a fact, and I think we should, and I agree with the council, and we should stick to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Crisp and then Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Chair. It does seem difficult to support. I think the shortfall in parking for the students, you can kind of see that maybe if the students go into a hall's residence and perhaps they see there's good transport links to the university they go into, they will make the choice not to bring a car. But for someone coming to work here, they will most likely be going to multiple different places of work, and there's a high chance they will need their car for work. So I think you're comparing apples and oranges here. I don't think it's saying that you can't look at the drop in the parking being relevant in the same way.
But that's why the application has been revised to only propose this for a limited number of rooms on that basis. And members have been saying previously tonight about that students all have cars, and it's not the case that they don't. And although some members have referred to them refusing the previous application, etc., the situation is that scheme was approved, whether it was through an appeal or not, and that is a material fallback position that developer can operate in September with a shortfall of 49-50 spaces. And what they're proposing to do here for the next few months until September 2025 is to operate with a different use for 68 rooms, but with the same shortfall.
But the shortfalls for two different types of users of the apartments, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but we've
got students and regular
we've
folk.
applied different parking standards on the basis of the two different uses.
But normally, don't you have, if it's 278, you're supposed to have 278 parking places in a normal block of flats.
Yeah.
But for the students, you have a quarter.
Yes.
But then you've taken it down from the quarter on the students. So what you've done is you've applied the quarter. You've taken the 67% down on the regular as well. So it's almost like the rule can be applied equally to either types of people. You're applying the same reduction again.
But we've applied different parking standards. So for students, there's a requirement for one space per 4 students. So on that basis, for 273 rooms, you need 68 spaces.
Yeah.
And we're saying with the serviced accommodation, it's only an application to change the occupation for 68 of those rooms.
68 rooms are occupied.
Applying a different parking standard of one space per room gives you a requirement of 68 parking spaces.
Yeah, but we've got 19. Huh? Okay, we'll talk about it in a pub afterwards.
Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a sorry business, isn't it? I must confess that, like Councillor Heeson, I had my doubts about the previous applications. That's water under the bridge. I would suggest that this smoke and mirrors affair really points to the nonsense, the inherent nonsense of those previous applications, to my way of thinking. But as I say, those things have come and gone. I do worry about this. I mean, it seems to me that the residents of the borough are picking up the risk for a speculative development, and I don't see why they should have to do that, to be honest with you. Also, I think the likelihood that that the uptake will be there, that these vehicles will be substantially larger than the vehicles, if the clientele that's envisaged is there, and that in itself will create a problem. It's a little bit disappointing. We saw ward councillors come make rather passionate representations this evening about this. This is an area with a parking problem across the road. It would have been nice to see some local input there. But like the previous speakers, I'm inclined not to support this. It does seem to me to be very much to the detriment of the local community. These things were done for a certain period of time. I can't see nowadays, in particular, students tend to move from semester to semester. Semesterisation has made letting that bit easier in that regard. So I'm not sure that the drive is there in quite the same respect. I'm also somewhat sceptical of the completion of this building, and I don't know whether this temporary consent, I know it would have to come back, but nonetheless then the argument will be that the precedent has been set, and then we'll end up with something which goes on and on and on.
Councillor Fear. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Credit where it's due. The Highways Authority in this case has reached a judgment or given its advice in a manner in which I agree. I appreciate the line of argument that Councillor Crisp made, but I think our officer's maths is correct. And in fact, this could be an application for the use of 69 rooms, which would be a much more exciting number, I know. As it is, it's a temporary request, isn't it? It's a request for these bedrooms to be used by a different class of user than is already approved. And it's not, as I recall, we've had applications similar previous for student accommodation that was purpose-built as student accommodation, that we applied all of the policies that we should for student accommodation to, and then when it turned out that the market had fallen away or that other circumstances had changed, applicants have come back to us to ask for consent for a different class of user. But we're not being asked to approve this for any use. We're being asked to approve this as serviced apartments. I note that one of the objectors, one of the representations received from the public was from another operator of such apartments, raising concerns about the impact on the market for such accommodation. And of course, that's not a valid planning concern. But I think Councillor Heeson touched on it at the first go. I think the reason I am uncomfortable with this would relate to highways and parking. And if I may advance an argument, it would be that such an amount of time has passed since we last looked at this, and it was approved, albeit not by this committee, but on appeal for student use. Such an amount of time has passed. And also because this use applies to different category of people we might routinely expect to have a car, as opposed to people we might routinely not expect to have a car, that it is reasonable for this authority to reach a different judgment this time, and to say that at this time, knowing the pressures on parking that we know, understanding what we do about the future occupancy or expected occupancy of that unit, it would, in my view, be reasonable for us not to approve this application, and doing so on the basis that I think Councillor Heeson advanced and other members have also touched on.
Is that a proposal, Councillor Holland?
It's not a proposal, except to say that, so other members have said that they are unwilling, I think, to vote through the recommendation. If a member was prepared to move refusal, I would consider that we'd be reasonable in finding grounds for such a refusal, and we would do so within the ballpark of the impact that this is going to have on parking and highways.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Williams, John.
We have changed, agree with some developers that the flats would move away from the students on a temporary basis. I'm thinking they're Bristol Street Motors, to take down there, but there's parking down there. And the question there are nurses coming over to work and out of hospital to provide accommodation for them. Also in the town centre, we agreed that some space, some of the apartments would go to the general use. We had Midway car park, which, I mean, that's changed, but at the time there's parking there. This, take each one as its own merits, is really too cramped, in my estimation, to allow more cars to park there. We've lost the battle on at the first battle. The first point with the planning inspector. He allowed that on the student parking. Now we're introducing something different. So no, I'll go to refusal on that point, Mr. Chairman, on the point that he would. The area itself is too small to accommodate the amount of cars that we are proposing to use that area of School Street, and the car park at the side there that's well used. I will be sarcastic there. It's well used, not going to be up for sale by the council, so it's well used, and it is well used by people shopping and also people using the Jubilee 2 baths. So I'd go refusal on that point, if that's a valid reason I can put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Heason.
Yeah, I think Councillor Williams stolen my thunder. I was going to say, given the previous comments and the points that Councillor Holland raised, I would raise a refusal based on those grounds.
So are you going to move that then? Okay. Do we see a seconder? Councillor Crisp? Do we see a counter proposal for acceptance of this proposal? I don't see one. So for the reasons the councillors have stated, yeah, have you got that, Mr. That there? We've got formally proposed by Councillor Heason and seconded by Councillor Crisp. All those in favour of the proposal to refuse? And that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. That item is refused. At that point in time, it's 10 to 10. Are councillors content with 30 minutes rollover on this or not? If so, show your hands now.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. You did adjourn the meeting after the first 45 minutes. Therefore, we do have that time still available to us before the Constitution requires us to stop.
I wasn't aware I was away that long, but I'll take your word for it. Yes, the point of order accepted, council. Business. It's item 9, application for minor development, units 10 to 14 and 35 to 39 Parkhouse Industrial Estate.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So full planning permission sought for the recladding and raising of the metal pitch roofs on units 1 to 14 and 35 to 39 at the Parkhouse Industrial Estate East site. So for context, the site is located within the industrial estate on Winpenny Road, which is close to Chesterton. So there's no objections in principle to the works, given the nature of the scheme. There's not considered to be any amenity or highway safety matters. So in respect of the visual impact, the proposed alterations would result in an overall height of the roofs being raised by approximately 200 millimetres, which would essentially allow for some insulation to be added. So the exact colour of the replacement roof hasn't been agreed, and therefore a condition would be applied to any permission requiring that those details be submitted to the local authority for approval. So the visual impact of the slight height increase to the roof is considered to be negligible and would not result in any significant or adverse impact on the site or surrounding area, particularly given the appearance of the industrial estate in which the application site lies. So here's a couple of photos of the site. And essentially, in the absence of any visual harm, the application is brought to the committee with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Councillor Fee, over to you, councillors. There's no speakers on this item.
I'm happy to move this, Mr. Chairman. I don't see there's any harm in this as long as we stick to condition 3. We have some recessive stuff. We don't add to the sea of silver. That would be great, but otherwise, I think this is fine.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fee. Thank you, Councillor Holland. All those in favour, show your hands now, please. And that again is unanimous. Thank you. That item is approved. Item 10 on the agenda is Bathpool Park, Boathouse Road, Kidsgrove.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So advertisement consent is sought for the installation of 1 welcome sign and 3 information signs at Bathpool Park, which is located on Boathouse Road in Kidsgrove. So 3 of the signs will be located within and around the car park located on Bathpool Road to the north of the park, whilst the other sign would be located close to the car park located on Peacock Hay Road further to the south. So these are the exact locations of the signs. The location 2 sign has been slightly set back from the highway at the request of the Highways Authority to ensure there's no impact on highway safety. Need some elevational details of the signs. So they measure 1.2 metres by 1.8 metres. The example picture on the right shows the general colour scheme to be used. So there's no objections in principle to the works, and following the reposition of one of the signs, there's not considered to be any highway safety issues. In terms of visual impact, the proposed signage is considered to be proportionate in scale, appropriately designed and positioned in the context of the application site and the surrounding area, and there's not considered to be any objections from a visual perspective. So the application is therefore brought to committee with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. No speakers on this item. Also, over to you, members. Councillor Faulkner.
This is in my area and I've had no objections to it at all. And I think they'd be a welcome use because of where they're placed. There are some areas where people come into the park and they don't even realise they're in there. So I think they're a very good thing and I'd like to propose this, yes.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Gordon.
Sorry to hold things up. Chairman, the illustration that we saw was a welcome sign. That's just one of the designs.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's what the other ones would be information boards, so it contains all maps, things like that, and just facts about the park.
Yeah, thank you.
For the councillors wishing to speak on this item, so we've had it formally proposed by Councillor Burnett Faulkner. Do I see a seconder? Councillor Beeston. Thank you. Formally proposed and seconded. Can I see a show of hands in favour, please? Again, that item is unanimous and approved. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11. Officers will introduce this report.
So the council has received an appeal from Gladman Homes against the non-determination by the council of an application for outline planning permission for the construction of up to 150 dwellings at land south of Eccleshall Road in Loggerheads. So just displaying there on the screen the site. So obviously we've had various developments in and around Loggerheads, both into committee or under construction. So there's one, this one here is the Muckleston Wood Lane scheme that we've got the current inquiry for. And this site here is the former Tadgedale Quarry site that's now under construction, as referred to as Shropshire Heights. So in these situations where we receive an appeal against non-determination of an application, the application is taken out of the council's hands and we're unable to make a decision on it. But because we need to proceed with an appeal, we need the council to consider its position in response to the applicant's submission of a non-determination appeal and to set out what members' consideration of the application would have been had they been able to determine the submission. So the report that you received in the agenda was kind of a background report, and then what in effect would be or would have been the officer's report on the application that would have come before you for determination if we were able to. So we're recommending refusal for a number of reasons, or we're recommending that the council runs a number of arguments at the appeal. The first one relates to the adverse impact on the character and appearance of the open countryside. The second one is the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. The third one is on the basis that insufficient information is being provided to enable a full assessment of impact on protected species. And the final one is the adverse impacts of the development, which I've just listed, are significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the development. So we're asking the committee to make a decision on whether they agree with the arguments that we are proposing to form the council's case at that appeal. Thank you.
Over to you, councillors. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the decision that we would have made had this authority been considering a report from its officers, I think I'm broadly in agreement with the draft recommendations that form part of the report. I think that's very likely that the members of this committee would have agreed with that and refused the application. In relation to non-determination, are we satisfied as a committee that the reason why this has been dragged out and a decision was not reached is failure on the part of the applicant to provide information that we asked for? And was that reasonable? And I think the answer to those questions from what we've heard and from what I can see in front of me is yes. We have not behaved unreasonably. If we do go to appeal, if the planning inspector asks that question, our officers have answers which I think are entirely reasonable. It is well within our remit to request that sort of information from applicants, and if for whatever reason it was not available to us, we were unable to reach a decision. So I'm broadly supportive of the report and the recommendations in it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillors wishing to speak? That's a no. So would you like to offer that as a proposal to accept the report, Councillor Holland?
Yes, I would. I can see recommendations A and B. I'll move those.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. From the chair, I'll second those. So I can see a show of hands, please, in favour of the resolution. Thank you. That item is unanimously passed. Thank you. Thank you, team. Moving on to item 12, application for financial assistance, historic buildings grants from the Conservation and Heritage Fund.
Just to mention very briefly that there was a supplementary report circulated today which set out that the Conservation Advisory Working Party recommended that the grant be paid in full. Thank you.
Councillors add side to that? Yeah, thank you. Moving it, Councillor Williams? Yeah. I'll second it from the chair. It's been proposed and seconded. Can I see a show of hands, please, in support of that as written? Thank you. That item is approved unanimously. Agenda item 13, 5 Boggs Cottages, Keele. That the information be received. There's no further update. Are we content to keep this on the agenda? Maybe. Let's see a show of hands, please. Thank you very much. That unanimously passed. Agenda item 14, report to the Planning Committee, Highway Access and Safety, Baldwin's Gate. And at this point, Councillor Holland, it's 3 minutes past 10. I concluded that's 3 minutes for my break. Can we vote to roll over 30 minutes if needed? See a show of hands, please. If needed. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. I know it's been a long evening. Yeah, okay.
Chair, are you taking this through that report page by page?
I'll take you word by word if you want. Are we content to accept this report? Do we need to ask any questions on the report?
Just make a point, I think, Chair, before we condemn the highways, some of their decisions. But we could go through this. You can see where the engineers at on that what the conclusion they come to. But what's missing from it, in my view, is the residents miss out on all of the highway reports. It's purely based on engineers. That engineer that off, they won't take that off to think about the residents in this area or any area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. This was the response, obviously, that I received from the letter that you asked me to write to Highways. The residents will have the benefit of this information if they didn't have it before. Any other councillor wish to speak on this item? Are we content to receive it as written? Can I see a show of hands, please? And that's unanimously accepted. Thank you. On goodness sake. So long, that report, isn't it? Agree. Item 15. Urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business tonight. Was any urgent business identified? Well, in that case, draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your indulgence tonight. It's been a very long night. Have a safe journey home. And thank you once again.